And before talking about the structure of the question and the demand of the question, something that most of the students are struggling with, this is what we have observed. Before delving into those details, I would like to give you 3 or 4 most important instructions that you should not forget while writing those answers. Number 1, most important instruction. Okay, number 1. I hope when you are writing the answer, you are sticking to certain time limit. Since we are not there to surveil you, we are not there to monitor you, we are not invigilating your performance for the time being. Okay, we have given you enough time. Approximately now, since on the demand of most of the students, we had even decided to release the question paper right at 12 a.m. so that students who are working, they could get enough time to get get to the hold of writing answers. Okay, because they are not able to get enough time, uh, uh, not able to take enough time out of their working schedule. So that is why we decided to do that. However, we also expect certain kind of uh, discipline on your part, and that is why it is very important, number 1, to stick to certain time limit. In the sense, the moment you see the question, please remember this, the moment you see the question, your time begins right there itself. उसी टाइम आपका टाइम शुरू हो जाता है जैसे ही आप क्वेश्चन देख लेते हो. Okay, and from that moment itself, you should not be taking more than how many minutes? Now here comes the second aspect. Time management is very important thing. Okay, now how much time should be given to these questions? Since the first test was of 20 mark and so is the second test, the question would be how much time should be given to a 20 mark question and how much time should be given to a 10 mark question. To a 20 mark question, you should not be giving more than 12 minutes. Okay, for 20 marks question, not more than 12 minutes. For 10 mark question, some of these you will be writing very soon, the 10 mark questions as well. Okay, 10 mark question, you should not be taking more than 8 minutes. And trust me, this is more challenging than this one. This is more difficult. Trust me, this is more difficult than writing a 20 mark question. You know why? For a very simple reason. In 20 mark question, you have lot of content and time, relatively you have 4 minutes extra, or it is only for those students who are actually following this timeline, this time limit. However, for those students who are not following the time limit, 20 mark question, they have full day to write. Okay, but this should not be the case. Otherwise, the whole purpose of joining the damn session would be defeated. Okay, so please, preparation is one aspect of this whole journey, but preparation in a time bound manner. Okay, which Herbert Simon would call as bounded rationality. Okay, rationality is something else. Okay, so in order to get more marks, you are trying to compile different sources and then writing the answer by the end of the day. That is rationality. Okay, but bounded rationality is to do the same thing within given conditions, set of time. Okay, set of words as well. Okay, so that is more important. Okay, so that is why, since writing 20 mark question is easier than 10 mark question, that is why we have started with 20 mark question. Gradually the difficulty level would be increased, not only of the question but also of the in terms of time management as well. Okay, since you will be you will soon start tackling questions that are worth 10 mark. Okay, so please keep these things in mind. And third most important instruction, do not exceed word limit. Do not exceed word limit. We have seen many questions, we have seen many students who are writing 4-page, 5-page or even 6-page for a 20-mark question, whereas the fact is in UPSC you will not be getting more than 3 or 4 pages, and that is also more than what is required. Ideally you should be finishing your answer in 2 or at max 2.5 pages, because if you start writing your objective becomes filling up the pages, you will end up losing many questions. You may not get enough time to attempt all the questions in that case. Trust me, you might have heard students talking about filling up all the pages. This is not class 12th ka paper. This is not class 12th ka paper. This is not BA, BTech wala paper where your examiner is going to get impressed by the number of pages that you have filled up. See, this is UPSC. This is very competitive examination. Here, examiner, when you know that 10,000 copies are going to get evaluated within a span of 2 months, so you can easily think how much time they are actually going to allocate per copy, not more than half an hour. And in such time bound manner, if they are evaluating the copies, you can easily figure out the things actually they are looking into your answer, the things that are actually trying to seek in your answer, then that is nothing but keywords, nothing but keywords. And here comes the fourth point. This is why focus on keywords alone. This is why focus on keywords alone. कहानियां आपको आती है, सबको आती है, मुझे भी आती है, ठीक है? So we are not here for a full-fledged foundation course. हमको बहुत restricted रैकेट जो specific keywords हैं उनके ऊपर discussion करना है. These keywords should be there in one or the other form. If not these, at least some other, but keywords should be there. Okay, this is very important thing. Now let us start quickly the discussion on the question. Okay, and see what actually was the demand of this question. Then we'll figure out what extra could be done on your part which somehow you did not do. ओके, शुरू करते हैं. क्वेश्चन क्या है पहले देख लेते हैं. क्वेश्चन, द क्वेश्चन वाज contextualize sociology in the debate between science and common sense. Now the thing is, what exactly is the demand of the question? You should give at least 20 to 25 seconds to this question in terms of thinking what exactly the demand of the question is. Okay, see, as a layman, simply if you look into the sentence, you will see sociology. You have to trace sociology, you have to contextualize sociology, you have to locate sociology in the whole debate between science and common sense. Where do you fit in sociology? Do you fit it into the category of sciences, or do you fit it into the category of common sense? You have to contextualize sociology in the debate between science and common sense. This was the question, so easy. Only the language was tweaked. Okay, but comprehension ability is as important as the knowledge that you guys have. Okay, contextualize sociology in the debate between science and common sense. Now let us quickly start discussion on this question. First step should be to discuss briefly the differences between common sense and sciences. Okay, now see here. Common sense is generally explained as naturalistic and individualistic explanation. Is something that I don't need to explain on. Okay, science is completely scientific in the sense that whatever explanation is there in the natural sciences, that is based on certain theory, certain data. So the explanation is not purely naturalistic or individualistic. It is something that everyone would equally conform to. Like for example, the law of gravity is not individualistic explanation. It is an explanation which is the product of certain experiments which have gone into the making of that law. Okay, and that is universally acceptable and valid as well. One of the principles of sciences as postulated by Robert Merton, kudos, communalism, universalism, disinterestedness, organized skepticism, जहाँ पे universalism का focus इसी चीज पर है. Okay, now Second, okay, सेकंड जो है हमारा कॉमन सेंस में, दैट इज opinion, assumption and superficial observation. So basically common sense is based on opinion, assumption and superficial observation, right? Whereas science is based on empirical data. Okay. The data is highly empirical. Let me close this window first. Yes. Third is common sense lacks validity, reliability and objectivity, whereas science has valid and reliable statements. And you know, this is something that Karl Popper has also extensively discussed through his theory of both logical positivism and post-positivist theory. Okay, where he goes on to talk about two kind of method, one being inductive, second being deductive. The students who have studied these things extensively may be very well aware of what exactly I'm talking about. I'm talking about the idea of verifiability and falsifiability. Okay, both of them are the tenets of sciences. However, the principle of verifiability was something that initial positivist scholars were going with. However, Karl Popper believed that as a scientist, we should not be collecting data in order to verify our thesis. Rather, we should be collecting our data in order to negate the hypothesis that we have established in our mind. So, unless the hypothesis that you have made in your mind or the hypothesis that you have before you, unless that hypothesis is falsifiable, it is not scientific. So something, whatever you say, should be falsifiable. If you're not able to falsify that theory, it is not scientific. If I say God exists, but if I cannot prove it wrong, it is not scientific statement. Okay. Now next is common sense is unreflective and rarely questioned. Rarely questioned. Okay. On the other hand, science is highly open system. Okay, it is highly testable. Whatever you talk about, the theories are highly testable. Those theories which are not testable are categorized as are categorized as pseudosciences. Theories that are not testable, theories not testable are categorized as pseudoscience. Who has made this statement? Who has made this statement? Yes, right, Karl Popper. ठीक है, राइट ही होगा. कुछ लोगों ने बोला होगा कार्ल पॉपर, कुछ ने नहीं बोला होगा. जिन्होंने नहीं बोला होगा उनको पता चल गया होगा अच्छा कार्ल पॉपर है. जिनको पता था वो बहुत खुश हो गए, यहाँ हमें याद है. ओके, सो कार्ल पॉपर has made this statement: theories which are not testable are regarded safely as pseudosciences. Now, what are the example of those theories? Marxism. It is not a testable theory. Marx said revolution आएगा, कब आएगा? You cannot test it. Marx said alienation हो रहा है. You cannot test whether someone is actually the victim of alienation. What is that scale? Is there any quantitative scale through which you can measure the degree of alienation? You know, these things are very vague, abstract things. You cannot quantify emotions. Okay, and that is why it shows the limitation of the application of scientific method to the social phenomena. Okay, something related to the homework question also that I have discussed, that I have given to you. Okay. I'll be discussing that also in a short while. Let me come to the second thing. Yes. Common sense, last point, is temporal and spatial. It is culture specific. It is not universal. Okay, it is not universalistic, structurally universally found. Okay. In the sense it is, but however, common sense exists everywhere. But common sense to one region may be nonsense to another region. To one man would be nonsense to another man. To one woman may be nonsense to another woman. To one country may be nonsense to another country. To one culture may be nonsense to another culture. So it is very highly temporal and spatial, culture specific, local. Okay, localized. However, unlike common sense, science is highly universal. Okay. So whether you talk about law of motion, you talk about any law of gravitation, Kepler's planetary theory, all those are not culture specific theories. Those are universally acceptable theories, whether you are Indian American, man or woman, equally applicable and equally acceptable to everyone. Okay. Now, Why did I discuss common sense versus science here? What you guys have done, let me also discuss. Most of the students have written what they knew. And what did they know? They knew only one thing. Difference between sociology and common sense. This is what they knew. This is what they have written. They, that means, completely ignored the demand of the question. Right? You knew the difference between, this is something that you might have prepared, difference between science and common sense. However, we did not ask this. I asked how do you contextualize sociology in the debate between science and common sense, not sociology versus common sense, क्योंकि already contextualize करने को मैं बोल रहा हूँ. तो आपने क्या किया? आपने कॉमन सेंस वर्सेस साइंस की जगह कॉमन सेंस वर्सेस, या आपने काट के सोशियोलॉजी सीधा लिख दिया. फिर बताया हाउएवर सोशियोलॉजी साइंस टू सम, ये वो सब. बेटर है आप ये मत करो. उल्टा क्योंकि क्वेश्चन की जो डिमांड है दैट वाज डिबेट बिटवीन साइंस एंड कॉमन सेंस, राइट? तो इसलिए आप इनको ही फोकस में रखो. टेबल में डिफरेंसेस में आप इन्हीं दोनों पे फोकस रखो, कॉमन सेंस एंड साइंस पे, राइट? ओके, नाउ लेट अस get to the next step of this question. Okay, how much time should one take to write these things? Only these things. I have not written complete sentences as well. Okay, basic keywords I have written. Hardly, if you remember the basic points, if you have common sense, in fact I would say it will take you not more than 2 minutes. To be very honest, it won't take you more than 2 minutes. Okay, especially if you have come prepared with specifically with that one topic, तब तो आपको ज्यादा टाइम लगना ही चाहिए. वो अलग बात है कि आप बहुत टॉपिक आपने पढ़े तो याद करने में टाइम आ रहा है, बट यहाँ तो एक ही टॉपिक पढ़ने को आपको बोला था. ओके, नाउ नेक्स्ट पार्ट इज contextualizing sociology, right? Contextualizing sociology, which is the basic spirit, the soul of the question. How do we contextualize sociology in the whole debate between science and common sense? All of us know very well that when you talk about contextualizing science in the discourse, sociology in the discourse of sciences, the one thing that everybody can easily think of is the school of positivism. The school of positivism. And that is why in the interaction between sociology and science, what I have mentioned? I mentioned positivism. This positivism that I have written lies at the intersection of sociology, okay, sociology and sciences. Okay, so positivism is nothing but application of scientific method to the study of social phenomena. Now, positivism talks about value freedom, and there are two major positivist strands. One is Marxism and second is structural functionalism. Both of them are positivist philosophies. Positivist philosophies. Why? Because positivism talks about human behavior being governed by external stimuli. Human behavior being governed by certain social structures which are external to the human behavior, which are external to the individuals. So that way positivism does not lay emphasis on individuals as much as it does lay on the structures. In fact, it completely negates or ignores individuals. It only talks about certain laws. It only talks about certain social structures, how those laws or social structure influence the behavior of the human being. And if you talk about Marxism, Marx has clearly laid out different laws which drive the discourse of history. And there he talks about dialectical materialism. How 3 laws of dialectics, okay, something that was given by Hegel but postulated by Engels and applied by Karl Marx in order to explain the historical material evolution of society from one mode of production to another mode of production. Okay, so he used 3 different laws to explain the whole evolution. So is the case with structural functionalism. It ignores individuals. It talks about certain structures and interdependence upon between those structures, and how this interdependence creates to or leads to establishment of social system as a whole. Okay, how social equilibrium is maintained altogether. This is something that circle functionalism talks about. Both of them are positivist philosophies. Both claim to be scientific. Marx talks about scientific theory of society. This is what he says, that what I'm postulating is a scientific theory of society. Okay. On the other hand, Auguste Comte, as you know, he says that sociology is the science of society. In the hierarchy of sciences, he places sociology at the topmost rungs of that pyramid. Okay. So anyway, since he believed that the same method is going to be employed in the study of social world, that is why he talks about unity of sciences, unity in sciences. Okay. So this shows, positivist strand actually shows the convergence between sociology and science. Okay. Or the science of society, literally the science of society. And the example of this would be Durkheim's theory of suicide. He specifically laid out rules of sociological method to explain how we can apply scientific method to the study of seemingly social phenomena, one of them being suicide rate. Okay. Now let us talk about interpretive sociology. Interpretive sociology, most of the students think that to Max Weber, sociology is not science. This is a wrong notion completely. Completely wrong understanding. This is not right. Max Weber also believed that sociology is science. However, his understanding of science is highly different from the understanding of the science as is given by any natural scientist for that matter. Unlike a natural scientist, a sociologist is not studying any particular object or a natural phenomena or event. Rather, a human being in the social sciences is studying another human being and the culture. Okay, so that way, the notion of objectivity, the notion of rationality, the notion of value freedom is highly difficult to be maintained in the discourse of sociology or social sciences. And that is why Max Weber says that sociology is a science of its own type. It is the most comprehensive science of social action. This is what Max Weber believes. Science of social action is a term given by Max Weber. Okay, science of social action, very important. So which means he is not rejecting the notion of science. He is simply rejecting the dominant notion of science that was going on, or in the name of which the hierarchy of sciences are established world over, in the name of which disciplines are hierarchized into superior or inferior disciplines with one another. Okay, this is something, this notion of science was something that he was against. Okay, so you know easily what social action is all about. He was basically more interested in studying the meaning and motive of the individuals, large number of individuals, and how that social action, the social action of large number of individuals, drive any kind of social change in society, whether it is rise of specific structure like rational legal capitalism, authority structures, bureaucracy, bureaucratization, or whether you talk about any kind of participant observation where you have to engage or immerse in the field, and this immersion involves a complete understanding of the natives. You have to go native is something, okay, that Max Weber also talks about, and Clifford Geertz, being one of the follower of Max Weber, talks about the same thing in his theory on deep play, an ethnographic study that he conducted in Balinese island at Java, in Java. Okay, now phenomenology. Phenomenology, since it is more about epistemology, it is more about the origin of meaning, how we attribute meaning to something. So it is something that is very vague. It is more about the study of life world, Leibniz. Okay, it is more about the study of the idea of how we as an individual ascribe different meaning to the similar phenomena. Okay, at different points of time, at different places. Okay, and and this very explanation also involves colonization of live world, an example or a theory given by Habermas. Okay, so symbolic interactionism is one of the strands of phenomenology. Yes, this is something that students may not be aware of. Ethnomethodology is another strand of phenomenology itself. Okay, so phenomenology includes, just like positivism includes both of these schools, similarly, Phenomenology includes both of these schools. And this school was completely against the notion of sociology being science. So, but however, this does not mean that these things are not sociological theories. Whether you talk about positivism, which adopted the notion of science and employed scientific method to the study of social phenomena, whether you talk about science of social action, interpretive sociology, whether you talk about phenomenology, symbolic interactionism, or ethnomethodology, or for that matter dramaturgy, or for that matter social constructionism, or for that matter postmodernism or post-structuralism, it does not matter, because all of them, despite being different from one another, are nothing but consisting of multiple paradigms, and this shows a science of its own type, and Thomas Kuhn calls it multi-paradigmatic science, which is quite different and unique in comparison to a single dominant paradigm that are highly dominant in the discourse of natural sciences, like for example Einsteinian physics or Newtonian physics, you will see, are one of the most dominant paradigms available in the natural sciences, or for that matter in physics. However, in social sciences, specifically in sociology, there are multiple paradigms available. You cannot say that Marxist explanation to the given phenomenon is the absolute correct explanation, or for that matter functional explanation to the given phenomenon is absolutely correct, or feminist explanation is absolutely correct. All of them are engaged in exploring different kind of domains, something that is not being explored by either one of them in isolation to one another. So you have to take into cognizance all of those paradigms, and this shows that sociology is a science of its own type, since there is no one dominant paradigm available. This is why Thomas Kuhn calls it a young science. He calls it a multi-paradigmatic science, but he does not reject or he does not refute the notion of sociology as scientific. Okay, and in the end, what you can do, you can talk about Lyotard. Okay, he's a postmodern scholar. Lyotard, why do you need to introduce Lyotard? See, this will give you a very different kind of dimension to your answer. Lyotard talks about the end of meta-narratives. Meta-narratives means grand totalizing ideologies or beliefs or theories which claim to explain everything. However, science is also one of the meta-narrative, Lyotard would say. And one of the example he would talk about is obviously, like for example, string theory or quantum physics. These are some very random and vague metaphysical abstractions that are involved in the contemporary scientific discourse, something which cannot be proven right. You cannot scientifically validate or test string theory. You cannot scientifically validate or test quantum physics. These are very futuristic things which cannot be tested. However, that does not mean they are not in the scientific discourse. They are still there in the scientific discourse, and this is what Lyotard is very much against. And he says, to have the notion of science or to consider sciences as the most supreme would be very stupefying, a very stupid idea, because you are considering something as superior which in itself cannot claim to be superior of all, when the whole scientific discourse in itself has started talking about very random or metaphysical abstract theories like quantum physics or string theory. Then how can you say that science is the most empirical or hierarchically superior of all the subjects or disciplines? So in the end, you can simply refute the notion of science altogether. Okay, you may even talk about John Urey. I don't know how many of you have read this theory. The theory given by Urey and Sayre, that is the realist view of science, where they talk about open and closed system, but that would be a lot of things. Okay, I don't want to confuse the students who might not have read those things, but it does not matter, because this is the bare minimum that you should have written in order to get good marks. And I would consider anyone getting 12, 13 as performing really good. Okay, so whosoever is performing anything above 10 is quite good. Okay, above 12 is amazing. Okay, so this is the bare minimum that I would expect from you guys. Okay, how do we conclude? In conclusion, you can simply talk about how the whole evolution of the discourse of science, or for that matter society, or for that matter sociology of science, or to introduce scientific discourse into sociology, how that whole discourse has actually evolved from one level to another, where initially we were talking about science of society, positivism, to now we have started talking about sociology of science itself, we have started questioning the very dominant paradigm of science, which was actually one of the yardstick to measure the empiricism or rationality of a specific discipline. That in itself has been posed question by the discipline that was aiming to be scientific at one point of time. This is very interesting thing. Okay, so this is something that you could have written in your answer. Now let me discuss the homework question, the yesterday's homework question, very briefly. Okay, so yesterday's homework question was different strands of European sociology and how is British sociology different from French sociology. Let us first try to, very briefly, let us first try to understand what are the different strands in European sociology and how European sociology is not a homogeneous sociology. It consists of heterogeneous belief systems and different kind of theorists. Okay, so all of us know that sociology has its root in Europe. Roots in Europe. Okay, the same land where Renaissance, Enlightenment, Scientific Revolution, Commercial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, all the revolutions in the world happened only in the England, only in the Europe. So that we know that it is the land of transformation, it is the land of revolutions. Okay, and sociology, as all of us know, is one of the outcome of those revolutionary changes in order to study, which actually evolved in order to study the social changes and the social evils associated with those revolutions. Now let us try to look into the different strands of European sociology. So let me draw something like this. European sociology. What are different strands? One is French sociology. Second is British sociology. Okay. Third, as some of you were wondering, and you were also missing a lot on or is German sociology. And the last one, which is not as important as these strands, but is equally important. Okay, not as important, but not so insignificant as well. Okay, that is Italian sociology. Okay, these are four different strands of European sociology, and the next one is American sociology, which does not come under European sociology, that is something else. Okay. Okay, so now let us talk about European sociology briefly. Let us first talk about certain important actors or social scientists involved in that specific branch of sociology. French sociology, when I talk about French sociology, I would easily talk about few names like Auguste Comte, Emile Durkheim. Okay, Auguste Comte, Emile Durkheim or Saint-Simon, not Saint Simon or Saint Simon, it is Saint-Simon. Okay, Auguste Comte and Emile Durkheim or Durkheim. Okay, British sociology, when you talk about British sociology, who are the important actors is equally important here for us to understand. Okay, one of the most important actor in British sociology is Herbert Spencer. He was an Englishman. Okay. German. In Germany, you talk about two most important scholars. Okay, one is Karl Marx, second is Max Weber. But however, both of them are completely opposite to each other. That shows that German sociology, unlike other strands, was not a uniform strand in itself. It largely actually had developed split within itself. And from that split came Weberian sociology and Marxist sociology. Okay, so Weberian sociology and Marxist sociology. And the third important scholar in German sociology is George Simmel. George Simmel, Ferdinand Tönnies as well. Okay, these are very important scholars. Okay. Some of those people who you often find in the discourse of scope of sociology, where most of them, the German scholars, would be situated in the formalist school. The French scholars are largely situated in the synthetic school. Okay. Anyway, and now who comes under Italian sociology? Very famous man. All of us know about him, but we did not know that he is actually Italian. He was actually Italian. Okay. His name is Wilfred Pareto. Wilfred Pareto. Someone who has given elite theory or circular theory of social change. Okay. Or someone who has talked about circulation of elites. Okay. So he has given a social change theory, circular theory of social change, circulation of elites specifically. Elite keep changing from one to another, masses remain the same. Okay, this is what largely his theory is all about. Since our question was mainly about French and British, so let us briefly discuss some of the important points related to the French and British sociology. See, French sociology evolved as a reaction to French Revolution. Auguste Comte was not really so much in the favor of this French Revolution. To be very honest, he was not really so much in favor. That way he was conservative because he believed that this French Revolution has unleashed anarchy in the French society. It was a phase of interregnum that was very prolonged one. Okay, anomie phase, something that Durkheim also talked about. Okay, although anomie as a term was given actually by Durkheim, but the phase of anarchy is something that echoes the sentiment what were actually deeply postulated or explained by Durkheim. Okay, so French sociology evolved as a reaction to French Revolution. Okay, and it largely studied social structures. Okay, study of social structures. How social structures are static and how with the revolution they change. So that way the study was more about social statics and social dynamics. Okay, social statics and social dynamics. And Auguste Comte was more interested in dynamics, and he believed that instead of political or economic revolution, the natural change in society would ultimately come, where all the upheavals would cease to exist, where all the disorder would cease to exist. That would be the stage when all of us, all the world society, all the individuals, all the group would be thinking in scientific fashion, would be thinking in positivist fashion. That is, all of us, irrespective of our social location, would be explaining everything in scientific form. Okay, so this he believed would usher in a new form of order in society, which has somehow got disrupted in the wake of French Revolution. Okay, now Durkheim specifically talks about social fact and how those social fact constrain the actors. So you can easily see that the French sociology was more about the study of macro, study of structures. This is something that we can easily figure out, right? Now, what was British sociology? British sociology, unlike French sociology, did not focus on structures or system. First of all, let us understand what was the origin of British sociology. British sociology evolved as a reaction to the underlying confusion that was going on in the British government regarding collection of data. They wanted to understand the working and functioning of the society, British society. So in order to understand the working and functioning society, they actually employed different people who could help the government to collect data on poverty, unemployment, crime, all those things. So they wanted to form a classified data on the kind of disorderly things which are creating a kind of disharmony in the existing social order of the Britain. Okay, in the then existing order of Britain. So which means, unlike French sociology, British sociology focused largely on individuals, not on social structures. So the focus was more on individuals. So unlike French sociology, which believed that structures constrain or drive or govern behavior of individuals, British sociology believed that it is the behavior of individuals which define the structure. Okay, so focus was more on individualism, and here comes the idea of ameliorism. Ameliorism. What is ameliorism? Ameliorism means instead of reforming the system, instead of reforming the structures, we should be focusing on reforming the individual behavior, which simply means that British sociologists lacked sociological imagination, in the language of Charles Wright Mills, who's an American sociologist. So British sociologists specifically, since they did not attribute the cause of the deprivation of the individuals to the larger structures, so it can clearly be seen as favoring these structures and blaming the victim of those structures. So that way, ameliorism means ameliorating the individuals. So working on the individuals rather than working on the social structure which has caused those individuals to behave the way they like. For example, a criminal should be reformed. Instead of reforming the system, let us reform the criminal itself. So this is what British sociology was all about. Instead of attributing poverty to the larger structures, class inequality, industrial revolution, or the degradation of work, the poverty was attributed to someone's laziness, stupidity, non-attainability or accessibility to education, or all these individualistic reasons were discussed largely. And third important thing that British sociology is often credited with is the theory of social evolution. Since I've already spoken about Herbert Spencer as one of the founder of British sociology, social evolution is of course one of the important aspects of the British sociology, which somehow converged the difference between French and British sociology, because French sociology also at a later point of time started talking about evolution, specifically in terms of law of 3 stages. Okay, the first stage being theological stage, second being metaphysical, third being the positive stage. This is how you could have finished your answer, okay, with the convergence point. This is all about today's discussion. Tomorrow we'll discuss today's homework as well, which was about how do we employ scientific method to the study of social world and illustrate with any 2 examples. I know all of you knew one example, suicide. The question is, what is the second example you would be giving? All of you, if are writing suicide only, then how would you get marks any different from the other person who's writing the same content? Also, the question is, I'm really interested in knowing whether most of you have, I'm sure some of you must have written about Adorno, how scientific method kills creativity. I'll ask them through this video session, please explain me how scientific method kills creativity. Okay, so this is also one homework question to those who must have written something like this. Okay, because these things do not make sense unless you exemplify those things. Okay, thank you.